On the lower roads of the strawberry beds running along the river Liffey, the Wern's Nest, a pub that dates back to 1588. And across the road, just over this wall, there is a weir, sometimes called the Wern's Nest weir. Most people believe the purpose of the weir is to supply the Palmerstown mills with the water supply, and the mill race runs off from the weir here. And this in part is true, but no one ever looks at the structures on the north side. Here on the north side of the Liffey, you can see where there's an inlet just before the weir where the water runs around. There's actually a sluice run alongside where the river runs in. And if you investigate around the area, you'll see the subterranean tunnels that run underground. The river flows underneath and joins back to the Liffey. And of course there's a reason for this. If you go back through old files and records, and indeed maps, you'll find records of a mill that once stood here. In actual fact, it looks like there used to be two mills. One was an iron mill and the other was a starch mill. The files go from 1877 up to 1912. And also the maps are 200-300 years old and will show clearly where the buildings used to stand across from the Wern's Nest. The weir, the mills and the area was known as New Holland. So if you go down to the weir today, you can see where the river still flows in and the sluice run is here, and the subterranean tunnels, as I spoke of, flow under the Liffey. If you make your way back over to this side, you'll see where there's inlets that kind of full up kind of out with muck, and I think this was the starch mill. So we'll focus on that first to show you where it would have been. So it would appear there was a large pool area here that was fed by the river that comes in from the Wern's Nest and from the river Liffey. Built up pressure and would go under the starch mill. And you can see the inlets just here. Over time, they've filled up with sediment, muck and even debris from the mills, which you can still see in the area. There's still cut stone lying around. A lot of the stone is covered over or perhaps repurposed and used in other buildings over time. At the Liffey, you can find outlets where water still comes from it to this day. This is a smaller one, and beside it a much larger one, which would have been the subterranean tunnels for the iron mill. Using the maps as a guide, this is how they would have looked in comparison to the Wern's Nest as an aerial view. This is the location where the mills actually would have been. And as I said, if you go to this actual area, you can still see the cut stone and pieces of the actual mill to this day. The iron mill lay closer to the river bank. It had the sluice ran down to it, and then that fed tunnels that ran underneath. Still to this day, water is running under the tunnels that where it would have ran. This mill appeared to take most of the power from the river that was deflected from the weir, having two sources of water supply going through, and as I say, to this day it is still great force that's powering through, the tunnel and sluice that's there. Here you can see steel remains of the superstructure. I imagine the sluice run would have controlled how much water was going through. And then there was water that ran directly under through the mill, where I imagine the wheel would have been sitting inside, getting turned by the power of the water. Using this abandoned mill in Meath, you can see where the mill race once ran through the mill and powered the wheel inside. And this is what I believe would have been a similar case in New Holland, except they were subterranean tunnels. This one, I think, used to come out and join back to the river visibly, where in New Holland, I don't think it did. Using the drawings on the map as a guide, I believe this is where the water used to enter the iron mill. So the outer wall would have been here, what appears to now be a bridge. And where the water reappears here, I believe is where the mill wheel would have been. This is the part where the wheel would have turned before the water again disappears into the tunnel and is not seen again until it exits at the Liffey. Again, using the old mill here as an example, this is where the water would have went through. As I leave this area and walk down to where the water exits at the Liffey, you can see more cut stone overgrown, and I'm curious if I come back in the winter when there's not as much foliage, should I be able to see more of this cut stone. And here we see where the water finally exits from under the tunnels and flows down to rejoin the river Liffey. As I said previously, New Holland appears to have been an iron yard and a starch works. And from this point here, looking into the fields, I believe this is where the fabric would have been left to dry in the fields here. The fabrics would have been exposed to the sun, and it would appear to have been a good place for drying, as seems to have been the case in other parts along the Liffey also. I myself, up to recently, did not know about New Holland or its history, and I found it fascinating, although very hard to get information upon it. Unfortunately, I couldn't get any old paintings or drawings, so I leave you with what I imagine it would have looked like. Thanks for watching.